it's Thursday. Thank you for joining for today's episode of ECC Essentials by the Denise Amberly Foundation. I am Halcyon Frank with the foundation, and I, as always, am very excited for today's episode. I say that every time, but I really am excited. We have Amy Mogan here today. If anyone is familiar with Justice Clearinghouse, you may recognize her name or lovely face. She does many webinars. I've got to join her for a few. But today she is talking about top 5 do's and don'ts for working with suicidal callers. As always, as we go through, feel free to put any questions you might have in the chat, and feel free as well to jump in, say hi, and let us know where you're tuning in from. With that, I want to make sure Amy has plenty of time to get through everything, so I'm going to pass it to her to introduce herself and jump right in.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Halcyon. I love being here. Halcyon and I have worked together for several years, and it always turns out well. So everything. You guys, she's a wonderful person to be hosting your stuff for. So my name is Amy Mogan, and I have a master's in counseling. I'm trained to be a therapist, but instead of doing therapy, I am more the kind of person who does the emergent, urgent kind of thing. And so I kind of relate to the 911 world, although not something I see myself doing. I have sat in ride-alongs, sit-alongs in dispatch and call taking. And I just want to applaud you guys for all the work you do, because this is hard stuff. And so I end up doing my areas of expertise are trauma and suicide. So I end up doing suicide interventions just because when I go teach places and I talk about suicide, I'm teaching about suicide, people have got my name and number and they write that down in the materials and stuff. And I end up getting calls later. So it's not quite the same, but hopefully what I've learned through my experience doing suicide interventions and crisis intervention, and then just my study and teaching of suicide will help you here today. I'm watching everybody say where they're coming from. This is awesome. They're all over the place. Awesome. Well, welcome you guys. So just want to kind of run through what I'm going to talk about today. And then obviously, like Halcyon said, you can ask questions. I'm here to answer anything that I possibly can. If I don't know the answer to something related to suicide, I'm gonna want to learn it, but hopefully I can help with anything. So I'm going to talk about when people call, what types of people call for regarding anything related to suicide, what to not do when they call, what to do, and then give you just a bit of background of what leads people to thinking about suicide. Why would someone consider suicide? Kind of how they get there, because I think having an understanding of that helps you more compassionately and accurately kind of interact with them and help them if you kind of understand where they're coming from. And then I'm just going to talk about kind of how to help them, which you guys probably have resources already set up, but just kind of walk through that. So that's just kind of what I'm going to do and what I'm going to cover. There are typically I've kind of counted 4 reasons someone might call 911 or even a crisis line to related to suicide. One of those is if someone is feeling suicidal, thinking about suicide, or actively suicidal. And I mean, they may call and say that they'll call me, I have a gun in my hand, I'm about to use this. And there are 2 sides to that. One is they're reaching out for help. One is, which you guys have probably found, they want someone, they don't want to end their life and then not have anybody know that they did. They want someone to come find their body, basically. So there's sides to the calling and saying they're thinking about suicide. And those are those 2. Then there's someone who has just attempted, and usually when they would call, that would be someone obviously who has taken an overdose. Some sort of medication allows them the time to call. And I want to talk through that as well. And then calling for someone else. So a friend that is suicidal, and then, they're not going to call. So you call on their behalf because you're concerned about them, from that angle. And then calling after someone has completed suicide. So someone who finds someone who has ended their life, obviously going to call for the help from that. So just those 4 for those kind of groups that call, I think what I'm going to go through will help no matter what the person is calling for or how they're calling, other than the calling after a completed suicide. The only thing I would offer for that is understand that person is going through a loss and a death and probably a violent and sudden unexpected death, and to focus on the fact that someone has lost someone through death, and not focus on the means, like not focus on the fact that they died by suicide, but just focus on the fact that the person has just found their loved one dead, however that way. So just kind of, I guess, the compassion that goes with that, rather than in law enforcement, I know there's a lot of judgment about suicide and so forth, a lot of misunderstanding about it. So just kind of like put away the how they died and focus on the person that has just lost someone and found them that way. As far as I'm going to go through first, like the what not to do, and then do the what to do to kind of help. And so when I say what not to do, it's really like, obviously you're going to be you and you're going to answer the best you can and do the best you can. And I can't give you answers for like every single call and what to say. And like every time someone says this, you say this, and it's going to work, because every caller, every conversation is going to be individual and it's going to be kind of personalized. But just as a general rule, when you understand suicide, you know not to do certain things. So one thing is to not judge or criticize. And I know that's probably like a common sense thing that everybody knows. You're not supposed to judge or criticize anybody that's calling you. But after you take call after call after call and year after year, some things begin to sound familiar, or you may become kind of desensitized to some things. And some people get themselves into really bad situations through their own behavior and their own actions and their choices. So sometimes it's kind of hard for us not to judge them or say, how do you think, if you're going through this, and this problems, like, did you not know that was going to happen? So it's really important not to do that, to be really open-minded and to just like, without judgment. This is not the time and place for your opinions. Basically, they're calling for help in whatever, from whatever those angles were. I told you before, those perspectives, they're just calling for help. And anytime you reach out and call for help, actually literally picking up the phone and calling 911 or whatever, is not an easy thing to do. And so once someone makes that step, they don't want to be, they're afraid of being judged and criticized already before they pick up the phone. So I would also,
I was going to say, I would also add, don't judge and criticize after you hang up the phone. Keep it off the phone, but then we have a tendency to get off the phone and start just making our judgments and assumptions and, oh, they did this. Why didn't you know that was coming?
Right.
So I just wanted to.
I'm part of that's a release of, you just took a very difficult call and you need to kind of vent and release that. But part of it is, I think once you have a really good understanding of suicide and where it comes from, you may not have that kind of feeling when you get off. I don't want to say attitude, because it's not but a perspective. You may not, your perspective when you hang at the phone may be one of more compassion and understanding rather than one of judgment or criticism.
Right.
Hopefully. So also tell them, these are the things don't to do. Just be like, hey, think of the positives. Hey, think of all the good things in your life. Because my example for this is and I'll try to do the visual here. If you're hold out your hands in front of you and you stack a bunch of books on top, and each book is a stressor. I use this visual all the time because it's like the most understandable thing I can think of. But you basically, for every stressor someone has, and that could be a trauma, which is going to be like a big heavy book, or it could be just like their car broke down. It's going to cost them money that they don't want to spend. Like all of these things that just all of us deal with in life every day, like they're stressors, and they stack this stack of books. And we typically, like, something happens, we'll have 2 or 3, and we'll like try to remove one, or we'll problem solve them. And you're kind of removing them as quickly as they come. And so you just have this kind of very little fluctuating stack of books, stack of stressors. But sometimes, things stack on a lot more quickly, or some books can be heavier. And so we'll get like 3 or 4 heavy books. And if you're carrying like this whole weight and you're carrying them, we can all do it. Like, I know if you've like tried to carry all of your groceries in from the car and like in one trip, and you're like hanging them from every part of you, like I'm doing this in one, and you're like carrying, and you couldn't do that for miles, but you could do it from the car to the house, right? If you can carry stress that way too. But someone who just keeps carrying stress and it adds on, they're thinking about these things because they're trying to problem solve. They're trying to figure out what to do. It's hurting them. Maybe it's pain. It's whatever they have going on is stacking up, and it becomes heavier and heavier. And at some point, they're not focusing on anything outside of that anymore. If you have a couple, like I'm still having conversations with people and I'm still functioning, still going to work, whatever. If you have so many, you can't see past that. You can only see what's hurting you, basically. And so you're carrying this, and your focus becomes more and more inward on, my arms are getting shaky, my back's starting to hurt, I feel tired. It starts mentally and emotionally. I kind of use the analogy of a marathon runner. Like that's a lot physical, but it's also mental, because when they start to hurt, they start to weaken and their legs are feeling like noodles, it becomes their mind then that they have to overcome. This is kind of the same thing. When you have all of those things going on, it starts to affect your emotional health, your mental health, in addition to your physical health. And you're trying to just carry all these things until you're just so weary and you can't. If somebody comes to you and says, think of this great thing in your life, you're like, I can't even like picture it, see it, much less think about it. And I have gratitude for it and I like it and whatever, but I'm so weighed down that seems like this little in the grand scheme of things. Or if someone comes to give you advice and says, hey, I know what you can do about book number 7 here. And you're like, I can't implement right now because I'm so weighed down. And 2, what about the rest of this? Like it doesn't help to say, think about the good things. Think about, oh, I have a solution or I have advice. Like that doesn't help. They're so weighed down and they carry this for so long and carry it for so long and they're hurting so much. They can't see solutions. And all they want to do at some point is just make that stop. And all they can think of is just dropping all those books. And it's kind of the best way I can think of to make a visual for how someone might get to the point. Suicide is not typically an impulsive thing. That last minute may be an impulse, but it takes a lot of time or a lot of stress to lead up and a lot of mental overcoming. Our brain's purpose is to save our lives. Like it takes a lot of mental thinking and planning and so forth to overcome that, to end our life. So when someone gets to that point, it's not that they're like, I just want to die. It's they just don't know what to do anymore and they can't focus on anything outside of all the things that are hurting them. So if you think of them, tell them to think of the positives, they can't. Like they literally don't have the ability to think of that. Also, if you tell them, don't be thinking about something crazy. Oh, don't do something crazy. One, that tells them you think what they're going through is crazy, which makes them think you think they're crazy, and which means you're not someone they can talk to right now about their problems because you're not going to understand. 2, telling them to not do something crazy is a criticism and a judgment. It's basically saying, don't think whatever you're thinking. So it's like if you like super sad about something and I say, well, don't be sad. You're like, oh, cool, I feel better. Like it doesn't work that way, right? Like you feel what you feel. And we're seeing a suicidal person's situation from our non-suicidal mind. So we can see the solutions. We can see they have hope, but we don't have their history and their genetics and their mental illness or disorder background or their experiences. We don't have any of that. We also usually don't know most of this. We may see this or, a couple of them. We typically don't know, just like nobody knows everything you're going through. So you have to remember that these are building up. They're building up over time. They make somebody weary and they just give up because they're just so weighed down. Another thing I want to mention, and this is the last one for the don'ts, is telling them to think about their family and friends, which is our inclination. When someone's going through something difficult, they're saying the negatives. We want to make them stop thinking about the negatives and refocus on the positives. But again, they're so weighed down and they're alone in this. They probably have not shared all of this with anybody, so they feel very alone in it. Telling them to think about the family and friends or the positives is not going to help them because they already know that. They logically know that. But more importantly, when someone's going through a bunch of stuff and all these things and they're carrying all these things, it typically spills over into their lives and they start to feel like a burden. And people say that suicide is a selfish act. And I'm going to contradict that completely and say a lot of times people are going through so many things that it's starting to affect their loved ones, their friends, whatever. They feel like a burden. None of us wants to feel like a burden. So they actually think ending their life is doing their loved ones a favor. So if you're saying, think about your friends and family, they actually are. And they think, yeah, I don't want to do this to them anymore. All I'm doing is causing grief, or I'm causing fights, or I'm causing financial stress, or I'm causing whatever. They think this is solving everyone's problems, not just theirs. And so telling them to think about that is kind of reinforcing that's what they're doing. They already are thinking about that. So you have to just remember when you're telling them, whatever you're telling them, is that they're carrying so much. They're not functioning and seeing things the way you are because you're not carrying all of that. They only can see what's hurting them and what's weighing them down and stressing them out and what's on their mind. The what to do as opposed to that is just let them talk. And I don't know how much, you can't spend. It's not like a crisis line where somebody says they're suicidal and you can listen for hours to the same person, right? You don't have that luxury, but you can tell them there's a crisis line. Let me connect you. I don't know if everyone has the ability to do that, or give them the number, give them resources. But the really most helpful thing is to let them say the negative things, which is hard because we want to be like, well, if they're saying all these negative things, they're thinking about the negative things. I need to get them thinking about positives. They're beyond that point. At this point, nothing you say positive is going to outweigh or counterbalance the negatives. What they need to do is have someone who can listen. And so, like I said, like on a 911, call takers don't necessarily have the luxury of 3 hours to sit and let somebody like talk and talk and talk. But you can ask them, who can you talk to? Do you have anybody to talk to? Let's get them on the phone, and let's, however you can connect them or make them call the person or get them to call a crisis line. If, whatever the situation is, listening is one of the best, most helpful things ever. So you're just going to ask what's going on. One thing I do is say, hey, tell me the one thing that's weighing you down the most. And they're not necessarily going to tell you that heaviest book, because that's kind of the one that's really hurting them and they're keeping kind of to themselves, or really to themselves, kind of secret even sometimes. But they'll test you by telling you a little one, and how you react to that is going to tell them whether or not they can trust you to keep talking. And you're not going to solve the problem. You're not going to give advice, which is kind of easy because then you don't have to think of the solutions. All you're going to say is, I get that you are really weighed down by this. I can tell that you're really hurting from this. Just hearing that, like if you've ever been hurt by something and someone says, man, I can tell this is really hurting you. You're like, oh, like you can breathe because someone hears you and understands you. A lot of times that's what people need. They just need to be heard. They just need to know it's already spinning around in their head. Like they're carrying all this around and thinking about it themselves. To share it with somebody who isn't going to judge and criticize, who's not going to turn around and say, okay, yeah, but think of the positive. Don't be sad. Like who's going to be like, man, that does sound rough. No wonder you're going through some stuff. Let's get you some help. That's really all you have to do. And then say, what else? If you have the time, what else is bothering you? Like, and you just kind of, and really the ideal situation for like crisis line is to let them purge all of those things, remove all of those things. And if you can't listen completely, they're still left holding the ones that they're kind of like keeping close, that maybe are the more embarrassing ones they're ashamed about or something like that. Maybe the heavier burdens as well. So as much as you can listen, but if nothing else, they're not gonna be able to give all the things to you. Just say, I can tell, or I can hear that you're really struggling and I really want to help you. Let's see what resources we can get you. And so if you don't have time on, a 911 call, obviously to sit and listen for hours, because sometimes it takes hours to sit and listen to all this. Just say, I really think someone needs to hear all the things you're going through, and let them know that they can be listened to, and give them a crisis line who can let them talk for hours and list out all the things that they're going through. And then again, no advice or solutions, just accept without criticism, without judgment, that they are going through something. And they just are. Like whether we agree they should be or shouldn't be, or whether you think that may be a little thing, but remember, it's part of this. Like, and we may only see this and this, like two little ones, and think, why are they talking about suicide? They just have this, or a breakup or whatever. You don't know their history. You don't know all the other things. So you can't really like even judge why they're thinking about it.
I think that's what makes it hard for dispatch too, because we're so used to like, oh, you have a gunshot wound. Okay, I'm going to walk you through my protocols. Oh, right. It's a domestic disturbance. Okay, I need to know what's going on. Is there weapons? And I'm going to send law enforcement. Right. Suicidal callers, it's just that, there's no positives that are going to solve it. It's just listening. And we're so programmed to like problem solve.
Yeah. Well, the problem solving for this, or the protocol for what to do, is the listening thing. And like I said, you don't have a lot of time, but to say, I hear you, even if you can't listen to all the problems, let them feel like they are being heard. Make them feel like, I want to hear, and I know this crisis line is really good at listening. I would love to connect you. I'd love for you to call them and let them, they will listen to all of this. Hopefully it's a good crisis line that's well-trained. I always am afraid, like anytime I send anybody to anyone else, I'm always like, oh God, I hope they know what they're doing, but because there's so much at stake, right? I mean, it's just like but you don't have the luxury of sitting there for hours. So just to say, listen, I really hear that you're going through a lot. I would really love for you to get some help. Really don't want you to end your life. You really, you can say positives like you have value and I really want you to stick with us. So you're just going through really a lot of stuff right now. And I get that it seems hopeless. Let them know you understand that it seems hopeless for them. Instead of just saying, I understand what you're going through. Really? Like they're going to be like, no, you don't. You have no idea what I'm going through. But you can say, I understand that you are really struggling right now. And this is temporary. So I'd really love to get you some help. And then, find the resources and stuff. The why behind, like I told you, they're carrying too many stressors. They carry it for too long. So they've probably been carrying quite a bit of this for quite a while. They're just weary. You just have to remember you're dealing with someone who is just weary. They're exhausted. They're tired. They're worn out. They don't see solutions. They have lost hope. And so just getting some little glimpse of a hope is really what they need. Someone's going to care. Someone's going to listen. You mean there are solutions that I don't have to be the one to think of all of them because I've been trying? Like just give them that. Look, I'm going to connect you to someone who is going to give you some help, or send help, right? You can send help. They feel alone. So the less alone you can make them feel, the better. And they really do. A lot of them just think, I can't tell my family about this, or my friends, if my friends knew what I was going through. And so they're just ashamed basically, and carrying all of this stuff and embarrassed about carrying so much stuff. And again, feeling like a burden. There's one thing that you kind of have to keep in mind, that we all, as people, want to have a sense of contribution to the world around us. And when you start feeling like you're a burden, you lose that sense of, I'm contributing something of value to the world. No, I'm just taking and wearing everyone else and sucking everyone else dry. Like, just remind them they have value and worth. Even if they don't have it in them to give right now, they will. They will at some point. They're going to learn some lessons from what they're going through, and they're going to share it in the future, or whatever it happens to be. They just need to be reminded that they're not alone, and that they have a contribution to make to the world around them. And you just remember that they're just tired of hurting. They're just weary and tired of hurting and feeling like they feel. So you can help them connect to resources, connect them to support. And that may be like, do you have someone in your life that you typically talk to? Do you think maybe you can call them and encourage them to call that person, right? Now, obviously, if you think they are eminently suicidal, like, I mean, you have your protocol for that, right? Like, everyone knows, like, I got to send help, or I got to do what I've got to do. But in the meantime, connect them have them call while you're on the phone or whatever. Like, can you call them while we're on the phone? I want to hear you connect, and have them tell, this person to be their kind of accountability partner, or say, hey, I'm struggling and I'm on the phone with 911, and I need to tell you right now that I've been thinking about suicide. Like, it's the hardest thing to do. It's so hard. But with you there, they feel less alone while they're doing that, and helping them feel less alone is really going to make a difference. The last thing I was going to say about that is make an agreement. It's not obviously a legal binding contract, but you say, hey, I want you to promise me and make an agreement with me right now that you're not going to hurt yourself. You're not going to do anything. You're not going to end your life. You're not going to follow through with your suicidal thoughts until you get to a counselor next week, or until you make this call to whoever and see if they can give you help first. Can you give me a week and maybe call me back in a week and see how things are going and let me know? I know you're not like the follow-up, whatever, and 911 is for emergency, but the chances are they're not going to probably call you back in a week, but they're agreeing to not end their life. And so just that kind of, in person, I have them sometimes like sign an agreement, like pull out whatever piece of paper I have and be like, sign this. Like, I'm going to live till Tuesday until I can. And just something about committing to another person makes them buy into it in a way. So that's it. I'm open to questions. I was like, talked so fast.
You're good. Yeah.
That's something.
So many good points though. If any questions, whether it's kind of something she talked about or even just related to the topic, by all means, throw them in the chat. But I really like one of the things that stuck out to me, and I think we forget, is think about your family and friends and like that they are, but to them, helping them is, offloading the burden that is themselves.
Right.
Versus, we think of it as like, think of them, they'll miss you.
Right.
Which I
I
think
somebody say one time that it seems like, or it's kind of equates to someone setting off a grenade in a room they're in to kill themselves, but all of their loved ones are in the same room. Like it's, they just, people are like, they're so selfish. They just don't understand the effect that's going to have on everyone they leave behind. They do, because they think they're helping. So would there be a different options to say or ways to help a teen in those thoughts? Okay. So the question is about teenagers having the same thoughts. Teenagers. So I'm going to just do a little comparison here. The elderly, ages 85 and older, have one of the highest rates of suicide completions. And that's because they're experiencing loss and pain. So if you think loss and pain are two contributors, they experience a lot of loss and they're going through probably chronic pain. And they know none of their situation is going to get better. So they use very lethal means, the elderly do. A lot of time with teenagers, because when I very first got into studying suicide years and years ago, I thought, teenagers, emotional angst, they have all this stuff. They actually have the highest rate of suicide attempts. And that is because if you think about, you're going to handle them all the same. They're tired, they're weary, but also remember that as a teenager, they're not an adult. So their brain hasn't even started to finish developing. So they don't have the problem solving skills that adults should have, since they do have, but it's not always the case. But they don't have the resources. Like they don't have, they can't just go, I'm going to call a counselor and go to a counselor. Their parents may not let them. They may not have the funds. They may not have a car. They may not have, they have to ask permission. They are a burden, right? They're already feeling like a burden. And if they're going through a bunch of stuff, it's going to increase their feeling of being a burden. And they have to ask permission, finance, whatever they have to ask, all these things. So you're going to do the same way. They want to be heard. But a lot of times when teenagers, basically the age group is like 15 to 24, when they are thinking about suicide or talking about suicide or even attempt suicide, it's the only way they have to communicate that they want help. And so they've been saying, I'm stressed out, I'm hurting, this is breaking my heart, this is whatever it is. And they're feeling this and they're trying to communicate it. But people are like, you're just being a teenager. Like I say, watch for significant mood changes in people. They're teenager, like that every day is a significant mood change, right? So to watch for that is a little harder, but so they have a hard time expressing or getting people, I guess, to take them seriously when they are literally really struggling. The only way they can do that is to be extreme and to be like, I guess I'll just kill myself. Well, and then people go, wait, now I'm listening. Like you said the word and I have fear about that. So now I'm going to listen. And so sometimes they will just use these because they've tried everything else. So if you can just show them you're taking them seriously and hearing them, that's going to be half the battle right there for them. They haven't been able to get someone to hear them most likely up until this point, or they just don't have someone who will listen, to tell. How to get them to open the door if when police arrive. Okay, how to get them to open the door if and when police arrive. When you send help, that's a tricky one. So, and obviously law enforcement has their ways of getting in if they need to, because they are commissioned to protect life. And that doesn't just mean if someone is going to take someone else's life. It means if they're going to take their own life, they have to protect that life. So they will do whatever it takes in that time to protect life. But it's better to say, hey, I've got, wait till the minute or whatever, and their call, and they say somebody's at the door. They're here to help you and to listen to you. They want to listen to you. And some people are going to be like, hell no, I'm not opening the door. And I was trying so hard. And they're just going to refuse, right? But everybody, let me put it this way. You have to find their bit of ambivalence. And it's basically every decision you ever make in your life, whether it's where to eat lunch, dinner, what to have for dinner, whatever, you're never 100% sure. Little decisions, but big decisions like ending your life, you're never going to be 100% sure. So even if they are 99% sure and they say, I'm sitting here with the gun and I'm ready to pull the trigger, they called. There's some little bit of hesitation or doubt or ambivalence that's keeping them from that. And that's where you're going to focus on. Like, what have you struggled before? Have you really had a hard time? What worked for you then that maybe we could implement? Get them thinking about what worked. Have you had anything to look forward to that you've been looking forward to that you would miss out on? And they'll say something. Let's think about that. Let's think about what do we have to look forward to. To get them to open the door, you're going to say, you called, and I really think that you have a chance for help. And I really think you have a lot of potential here. If you'll just open the door and let someone help you. Like, it's just going to really kind of like everything else when you're trying to convince someone of something, show them what's in it for them rather than I want you to open the door and they want you to open the door. Be like, look, I know that you don't want to do this. It's just as things are really hard. They're out there because they want to help. Like, now you're not alone anymore. Someone's here to help you. You're not alone. And just keep reminding them they're not alone, to tell them that the officers outside are on their side. They're partnering with this person now rather than an antagonist, which is how they're probably going to see it. Cops showed up at my door. As much as I love law enforcement and I'm an advocate and all my friends are cops, I'd be like, I'm not letting them in. What do they want? Like, it's scary, If you can just tell them they're on the same side, they're there for you. Like, they care about you and they want to help you, and just kind of get them that way.
I think that is huge, because the like assumption, anyway, like, a lot of times if you didn't call for the police yourself, if they're showing up, it's something bad.
It's scary. Yeah.
So then, yes, making sure that they know, like, no, they're here for you to help you. It is not, you called me and I sent them to come get you.
Yeah. We're all on the same side here. We all want to help you. Like, you're not alone now. You were feeling alone when you called. You're not alone anymore. Like, point out the difference there. Elderly versus teen callers. Okay, cool. Stress the help factor, then empathize. Cool. All right. So we're just getting comments. Awesome. Thanks for the feedback there.
Yeah.
Great.
So that brings us to time. Thank you so much, Amy.
Absolutely.
Let me know, you guys, if you would love to have Amy back, because I'm sure I could convince her to come back.
Anything
to talk more. To talk more, because this is always just a common topic. Anytime people are like, what do you need training on? Suicidal callers is always up there, because there are so many variables to it. So always such a good topic. Otherwise, we will go ahead and wrap up for today's episode. We will be back in 2 weeks on the 18th for our next episode. I'll put that registration link in the comments. And that is going to be That Didn't Go As Planned: How to Reconcile Expectations versus Reality as a New 911 Director, and the Lessons Learned Along the Way. So I'm looking forward to that one. Cami Haney will be on, and she took over for a small PSAP a little over a year ago. And so we are going to hear about her journey and what she's learned. And so looking forward to that one. And then Amy, do you have an email you could share that people could reach out to you?
Yeah. Do you want to type it or?
Yeah, type it, say whatever works for you.
Amy at Center of Training, my company, centeroftraining.com. Amy at centeroftraining.com. Did I type it right? Yes.
Perfect.
Okay. Yeah. Feel free to ask questions. No problem.
Yeah. And if nothing else, just you can say I sent you.
There you go.
Work. But yes, hopefully somebody decided to bring you back. So you're now on the list to come back.
There we go. Done.
But I will let you guys get back to your afternoon. Again, thank you so much, Amy.
Absolutely.
It was always a good time. And we will get the audio uploaded to Apple Podcasts, SoundCloud for replay there, as well as our YouTube channel. So if you missed any of it, just want to re-listen to the great information, you can access it at any of those places. And with that, enjoy the rest of your Thursday.